Welcome back in episode 12 of the Fourth Down Football Show. I'm your host, Matt. I'm going to be joined just a minute here by Melo, talk about the college football weekend it was. My Penn State Nittany Lions, of course, Alabama with a big win, Georgia with a big win, Utah losing to Washington, and Melo wants to talk about USC, so we'll get that in there as well. Then, of course, NFL. Lots of close games this weekend. So Kyle and I wanted to cover the Patriots, their tough loss in Germany to the Colts. And then, of course, wanted to cover the Bengals losing to the Texans. Texans impressive so far this season. CJ Stroud looking great. MVP candidate, maybe. The Vikings, big win. They've been on a roll. 5 straight wins. Going to dive into them, get into all of that. So, yeah, let's jump right into the college football talk with Melo. All right, college football with Melo, and disappointing college football weekend for me, but we'll get to that in a second, of course. Melo, how are you doing?
Just happy to be here, Matt. Thank you for having me on again. I do it for this channel. I do it for the people. Thank you, Matt, for having me on again. I appreciate it, man. This is for you.
That was the one good thing that came out of that game, in my opinion. Other than Penn State's offensive coordinator getting fired, but we'll get to that in a minute here. Yeah, embarrassing loss, but that's all right. What else did we want to cover, though?
USC. I mean, like I said, it's like the horse is already dead, and I've already buried it 10 feet under the ground, but they kept it somewhat close against Oregon, even though it really wasn't that close. Defense is still an issue, even though Alex Grinch is gone, which, I mean, it wasn't going to get fixed in a week. Jesus Christ, let's relax a little bit. But UCLA had a bad loss, so I was happy about that, and now both of these teams are stumbling into each other this weekend, and whoever has the ball at the end of the game is probably going to win the game. And I don't know who that's going to be, and it scares me. And Utah, Washington, I guess. Stay out west. And I think you wanted to talk about Alabama a little bit, too.
Alabama. Yep, Alabama and maybe a little Georgia, too. They're nice little win over Ole Miss. So, yeah, we'll get into all that. But, of course, we got to start off with the my Penn State Nittany Lions.
You just had another 3-0.
Yeah, they just did. Just right now. Just while we were watching. Or just while we were talking. Penn State did nothing on offense. I can't say I expect much from them anymore, but I've really kind of had my hopes up for this game. You know, a whole bunch of turmoil for Michigan there with Harbaugh and the cheating scandal and Penn State building momentum. We didn't lose to Ohio State that bad. It was our only loss of the season. We crushed Maryland in a game that, I mean, sure, Maryland's not ranked, but like they're not a joke of a program. So I was feeling not too bad, and, well, what do you know? Penn State's offense sucks, and Drew Aller can't play in any big games, and that seems to be my main takeaways for the most part. I mentioned it earlier. Fired our offensive coordinator. I'm not sure how much that's worth. It's worth something at least, but I think a lot of the blame does fall on James Franklin some though too, because just as a head coach in these big games, he's got a terrible record. I don't think he's won against a top 10 opponent in his whole career there at Penn State. So of course that features mostly Michigan and Ohio State as those opponents, but haven't won any of those games recently either, really. And just disappointing offensive performance. Drew Aller did not play good, and I think there's a little stigma right there for him that he can't play in big games as of right now because he hasn't been able to so far. So I think that's a valid stigma. This whole Penn State team seems to just forget how to play football when they see that little number up there next to the team logo, saying where they're ranked in the AP poll, whatever it is, the college football playoff ranking, whatever it is. They seem to say, actually, no, I don't think we're going to do good on offense today. I don't think so. We don't play to our opponent. We play worse than our opponent if they're good. And I mean, we don't have any issue rolling the bad teams, but that's not nothing new. We knew that going into the year, but just yeah, very very disappointing game. Our offense sucks. That's all I can say at this point. Play calling's bad, and offensive designs for getting our weapons open is bad. Use of our weapons is bad. Believe it or not, you can use a running back more than just to hand it off right up the gut every time. Did you know that, Melo? Because you can. Penn State didn't know that. So, yeah. What do you got on the game from an outsider's perspective?
USC and Penn State has two different problems that we would both like to get fixed. You have an offensive problem, and we have a defensive problem. And a couple USC guys, people that I follow on Twitter over the weekend, we were all watching that game because it was one of the best games of the slate this past Saturday. So, we're interested and intrigued. A lot of USC fans were making the point, would you rather have a great offense that can't stop anybody on defense, or would you rather have a great defense that can't score any points on offense? I'll take what you got. I'll take my problem. That was the worst thing about it is it's not like Michigan played great either. It's J.J. McCarthy was not anything special, and you in these type of games, you just want a chance. You just want to be in the game, and Penn State was in the game for the first half. I think they were only down 3 going into halftime.
Yeah.
And I think that was their only touchdown they scored. But I don't know how Penn State can do this every year. And at one point is the clock, maybe it's already, when is the clock ticking on James Franklin? Because when he picked up this program, when he took over this program, it was in a different spot. I'm not going to go into why. We all know why. I'm not going to do that. The honeymoon is over. It's like when he took over this program, took us to the Rose Bowl game. Yeah, we lost, but hey, we were in the game. Everybody was probably thinking, you know what? This is the start of something. Penn State's back. Hasn't been much since then. Losing to Ohio State every year and losing to Michigan every year. At one point, and I know going 10-2 every year, it's a great season for a lot of other programs out there.
It is.
It is. But at one point, it's like, hey, dude, like, something's not getting it done. In a conference like this, when really your only two opponents every year are Ohio State and Michigan, and you lose them both, something's got to change. That's just me as an outsider. But at what point do you start looking at the head coach and say, hey, what's going on?
Definitely. The only problem is we signed him to a giant contract not that long ago, just a couple of years back. So I don't see Penn State eating the money like Texas A&M did for Jimbo Fisher. But you never know.
Must be nice.
Could be the case. Yeah. Like you said about us having mismatched problems here. I think like when you consider the weapons that Penn State has had on offense in the past couple years and how many of them you see in the NFL. Yeah, you got Saquon Barkley and you got Miles Sanders. Name me another really good offensive player from Penn State. You got a couple tight ends. You got Freiermuth is okay for Pittsburgh. Mike Gesicki now in New England. Pretty good. Other than that, wide receivers for Penn State, I mean, the guys that we think are pretty good. I mean, they don't seem to do much in the NFL. Not that doesn't help us at college. I understand that. But, like, it just feels like, I mean, we're great at recruiting defense. We got the linebackers down, that's for sure. No issue with that. But recruiting some of these top-tier offensive weapons seems to be a bit of a issue for us. And then, when we have some decent guys, scheming them up. I mean, call some deep shots. Get get creative on offense a little bit, please. I mean, would it hurt you that much? And maybe firing Jurkic, our offensive coordinator, maybe getting some fresh minds in there, whatever it is. I mean, a lot of times you see the quarterback's coach get promoted to offensive coordinator for the remainder of the season. Maybe we'll see an outside hiring this offseason. Wouldn't surprise me. Would be nice. I don't know who we're going to poach, but I'll take anybody. Get some fresh names in here. So I'm just kind of hoping that getting a new offensive coordinator in here can help solve some of those offensive problems.
Yeah, and on my side, I hope we get a good defensive coordinator that can help solve the things solve the things that USC has their issues. But I mean, again, it's just I don't know how Penn State could do this every year. Go 10-2, and your 2 losses are to the only 2 games that really matter on the schedule. But
yeah,
you were in the game for 2.5 quarters. There's no moral victories here. I'm not saying it's something to be proud of, but Michigan didn't play that all that great on Saturday either. This is a winnable game.
It was, but Penn State's defense, as much as we want to hype them up and say they're a really good defense, which for the most part they're pretty good, but Michigan, I don't think they even threw a pass in the second half hardly, if at all. You got to be able to stop the run. I mean, I get Blake Corum is a great running back, but you got to be able to stop the run game a little bit at least. I mean, force them to throw a ball once in a while, but not able to do it. So I want to put a lot of blame on the offense, but believe it or not, the defense does take some of the blame for this loss too. Just you got to be able to stop the run game a little bit in the second half there, because that's where ground and pound, you just run down that clock in the second half. Doesn't give you any time to work with your offense anyway. So, yeah, I disappointed all around. But you got anything else in this game, or are we good to move on? Because I'm good to move on.
That Michigan game couldn't have come at a worse time. When the Big Ten just suspended Jim Harbaugh the night before the game. Coaches, players are all pissed off and they're riled up. If there was any more motivation to go out there and win a football game, it was looking at Penn State. Of course, Penn State was on the schedule the next day, literally the next morning. So it's like I feel for Penn State because it's like, damn. Like, Michigan was playing. Michigan was playing for a lot more than just beating their Big Ten rival and gaining another win and staying undefeated. They were playing for a lot more.
It's one thing to play with the Wolverine. It's another thing to play around with the pissed off Wolverine, and that's what Penn State had to do on Saturday. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about that. I just came up with that on the fly. I like that. You wanted to stay in the, well, not stay in the Pac-12. You're in the Pac-12 area, though.
We'll be there with you, though, next year.
That's right.
One more game of this crap, and then we're out of here.
Let's hear it. A little bit about USC Oregon.
I had no expectations coming into the game. So, listen, after they lost to Washington, the writing was on the wall that this season was over and nothing's going to happen here. So it was just, for me, it was just stay in the game. Just stay in it. Give yourself a chance. Now, who knows if USC was in the game in the fourth quarter and they lose by 3 or 4 points, I probably would be in here devastated because it's like, damn, they were able to hang with the sixth best team in the country and they didn't finish the deal. But I had no expectations. It was 36-27, I think the final score was, but don't let that confuse you. USC scored a garbage time touchdown, and then the game felt a lot. The score felt bigger than it actually was. The defense was not going to fix itself in a week. I mentioned that when we first started on here. again, too many explosive plays. I think USC had the ball first. They got like one or two first downs, and then they had to punt it away, and they pinned Oregon back, I think, within their own 15. And then the second play of the game was a 75-yard pass for a touchdown. I was like, just not good. And then they gave up another touchdown too, and the defender the Oregon receiver ran right past him, and then the USC on defense was looking the other way, thinking maybe he was on this side and he was on the other side, and by the time he looked, he was already gone. So just the little stuff like that. Again, not tackling. I think USC has the most missed tackles, I think, in the nation, I think. If not, they're pretty close. Just little stuff like that. And I would have been curious to see, had they fired Alex Grinch earlier in this season, because I came on here Monday. Every USC fan was happy, elated that Alex Grinch was out of the building. But I think on Saturday you saw, you know what, maybe it was definitely, he got most of the blame for that. But at what point is it also the players a little bit?
Yeah.
You know, the scheme, the players not tackling right, you know, not knowing where they're supposed to be in their assignment, where they're supposed to be at on the field and who they're supposed to be covering. Because I saw a lot of times there's a lot of USC on defense where they really didn't know what they were doing. And they got lucked out because Bo Nix overthrew the tight end, or he underthrew the wide receiver or something, or they gave up a little small passing play, but you were able to tackle and keep him in front of you. So I saw a lot of USC on defense guessing a lot. If Bo Nix hits on maybe one or two deep balls, this is probably worse. But I knew this wasn't going to get fixed in a week, and I just wanted to see USC give a shit. Because we were questioning whether this team cared anymore, especially after they lost to Utah. And USC showed me that they still cared. And I was proud of that. I was happy for that. That they didn't just go in there and lose, 49-10 or something like that. They cared. They scored some points on offense. They were trying to win the game. They were trying their best to be in the game. And with the season that we've had, that's all I can ask for on Saturday. Going into a hostile territory in Eugene, Oregon.
When you look at the box score for this game, very impressive from Oregon on offense. I mean, it's one thing to have your quarterback throw for 400 yards, 4 touchdown passes, no interceptions. But then to have your running back, like Bucky Irving, go for 118 yards and a touchdown too, I mean, that's things offensive coordinators dream of right there. I mean, you got both sides of the ball clicking, and listen to this. 2 receptions, 147 yards for Troy Franklin, the receiver. That's an issue. Not good. And for some reason, I doubt that was both 70 yards in the air. I'm going to guess it was, I don't know, you can tell me if I'm wrong. It could have been like a 20, 30-yard pass, but then a lot after the catch.
That's exactly what it was. Yards after the catch.
So a lot of that falls on tackling abilities for USC, as you mentioned there. So I'll take the Oregon road, though. I think you got to be feeling pretty good about yourselves. I mean, sure, you could have blown out USC a little bit more in this game, but hey, you still feel pretty good. That loss to Washington is one of the better looking losses this season so far. And I think you're well on your way to a Pac-12 championship game at this point, especially with Washington beating Utah now. So yeah, I'd feel great about Oregon here going forward, and your chances of making the college football playoff, they're definitely alive. There's a shot, especially depending on you to win that Pac-12 championship. And of course, we'll see the college football playoff rankings coming out here really soon, so we'll see how the committee feels about that. I don't think there'll probably be any movement again. Maybe I don't know. Does Michigan move up to 1? I don't know if they do.
You want to give Michigan more motivation going into Ohio State? You better put them at 2. You better keep them at 2. I think every Ohio State fan is like, please don't put them at 1, or please keep them at 2.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. I don't think I said that right. I think it's weird because if you put Michigan at 1, then Michigan's going to feel really good about themselves. But if you keep them at 2, or God forbid you drop them to 3 or 4, Michigan's going to come in with a bigger chip on their shoulder into the Ohio State game.
Yep.
So
we'll see what the committee thinks. It seems like they're going a lot off of resume here early on, and I mean, hey,
I'm sure that'll work out. They haven't screwed any other teams in the past with resume.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. They definitely have. I want to talk a little bit of Alabama. Quick moment to appreciate Washington's win over Utah. There was a good couple minutes in that game where I thought Utah was going to win it. I was like, hey, their defense is able to stop Michael Penix and this offense, but wasn't the case. And Washington wins by a touchdown. Maybe it wasn't that close, but yeah, Washington still feel pretty good about where you're at. I want to talk about the Crimson Tide, though. I got a chance to watch the majority of their beatdown on Kentucky, and granted, Kentucky, middle of the road program, not a great program, but they're not a joke of a school at all. So Jalen Milroe kind of dominated this game. I mean, 3 passing touchdowns, and I think he had a rushing touchdown too. Am I missing something? No. 3 rushing touchdowns. Jeez, I was selling him short. 6 total touchdowns in that game. I put the question on our story, is Alabama underrated? Melo, you think so?
I think they are. Believe it or not. I think we put too much stock into that loss to Texas earlier in the year, which was like, I think in week 3 or week 2. I think they're underrated a little bit. And maybe for Alabama, that's a good thing. Because in previous years, if they didn't make the college football playoff, or the expectations were so high that even if they didn't make the national championship game, it was a disappointing season. And I think they've missed the playoffs the last 2 years, so the expectations have come down a little bit. Georgia's been on their run. You had an LSU team get in there and win a national championship. Clemson's done their thing. I think it was better for Alabama to be a little underrated this year. And believe it or not, it looks like that Texas loss was probably a good thing, because everybody forgot about Alabama for the most part. You still have, Paul Finebaum and everybody who still thinks that they're going to, that still talks about Alabama for 5 hours a day. They've got a path to get into the playoff, believe it or not.
Definitely.
As a one-loss team. If they went out and beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, they should be the 4th best team. In my eyes. They should be. So, yes, to answer your question, they are underrated.
I think there's a chance if they win out the rest of the regular season, lose the SEC championship. Now, this would take a real miracle here. But if they lose the SEC championship and Pac-12 champions got to have another loss, I'd say. And, I mean, that's asking a lot of either Washington or Oregon to lose. But
you need Florida State to lose, too, I think.
Yes, or Florida State. Yeah. Which doesn't seem likely to happen because they got a nice little easy schedule the rest of the season. And then the ACC championship, which they'll play like Louisville probably.
Louisville, yep.
Yeah. So I think they're underrated, and there's a chance that they can make the playoff. But the teams that Texas, what? They're ranked ahead of them because they did beat them head to head. I mean, you got to give them that. But still,
Had some ugly wins.
I think you replay that game right now, I think Alabama wins. And maybe by like 10 at this point. I don't feel bad about saying that. They found their groove with Milroe. And I know it was after the Texas game, they benched him. And it was Ty Simpson, it was Tyler Buckner for that game. And it was like, nope, this doesn't work. We're going back to Jalen Milroe again. It was like, yeah, we messed around and found out that, we should have benched him after all, probably. But I think Alabama would beat an Oregon team right now. I think their defense is that good. They're going to be able to shut down Oregon's pass game a little bit. Kool-Aid McKinstry on the back end there, shutting down those receivers in Oregon, and I think Alabama's underrated. I'm not a big Alabama hater guy. Like, I know there's a lot of people who hate Alabama for just their dominance.
I'm with you.
I don't hate them for it, but I'm not a fanboy or anything either. I just think right now they're a little underrated compared to some of the other teams rated above them right now. But yeah, that's my case. That's my thoughts on Alabama. Anything else you want to talk about here? Want to cover?
Just since we're on the topic of college football playoff, would you agree that now it sucks because these two teams play each other in next weekend? But would you agree that Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State is in no matter what?
I think so at this point. I think so.
So you have essentially you have 5 teams playing for one spot right now. Maybe 2. Let's see how the Michigan-Ohio State game turns out. Because if it's a total... I don't know what the committee would do. If it's a beatdown of either side, I don't know how they do that. But if it's a close game, you got to keep if it's a close game, you got to keep that in the top 4. I think.
I think so too. If it's a beatdown of
if Ohio State beats down Michigan, I don't think Michigan is
going to get in. I agree. Because Michigan's only other significant win is against my Nittany Lions, which at this point are going to fall to like 12, 13, 14, something. And it wasn't a blowout, which doesn't help them. So, but when you look at Ohio State, their resume is a little bit better with the Notre Dame win and the Penn State win at this point. And then, of course, you'd add the Michigan win on there. So,
and a Big Ten championship.
Yes, and a Big Ten championship. So I think in that case, if Ohio State would crush Michigan, I think we'd be looking at Georgia, Ohio State, Pac-12 champion, whoever it would be, Oregon or Washington, and then Florida State, Alabama. I don't know.
Texas.
That's tough. Like, an Alabama team whose only loss is Texas and in the SEC championship, or a Florida State team who hasn't really played a lot of people, but ACC champions. It's a tough one.
Somebody's going to get screwed this year again.
Definitely.
It's shaping up to be one of those years.
Yeah.
And I hate to be like that, but I think Florida State's going to be the one that's going to get screwed.
You think so?
I think they're going to get screwed.
I don't disagree with that.
If they weren't undefeated, they wouldn't be anywhere near this top 10. I don't think.
No. And they kind of got a little blessed with their schedule, I'd say. Now,
that LSU win means nothing anymore now.
Yeah, I agree with that because LSU's sort of, I don't want to say they're a fraud, but
7-3 and they're 15th ranked.
Yeah. I want to pull up Florida State's schedule here real quick. But yeah, it'll make for some good bowl games, though. I'll say that.
Yeah.
A lot of good teams.
Motivation, too. When I went to the Rose Bowl game the first year, I was afraid that a lot of Ohio State fans were not going to be interested because they probably felt like they got screwed. They should have been the fourth team in when they lost to Michigan, and then they only came out and won the Rose Bowl game against Utah, and they were kind of like, yeah, we should have been that fourth team. And I talked to a lot of fans after that game in Pasadena. They were like, yeah, we should be, we would have, and I think Michigan ended up losing anyways. It's like, we should have won, that should have been us. So, yeah, it's going to create for some great bowl games.
Florida State's schedule this season. LSU, obviously, to open the game. Southern Miss. Boston College. A Clemson team that turned out to be a fraud, which it took overtime for Florida State to win that game. Virginia Tech. Syracuse. A Duke team that's currently ranked. Not a bad team. Wake Forest. Pitt. Miami. Now they got Northern Alabama, and then Florida to close out the season. They played one good team all season in Duke, and they're middle of the road good. I don't know. Just saying. So we'll close out the college football talk with that. Thank you, Melo, for hopping on, and we're going to jump over to the NFL side with Kyle now. All right, hopping over to some NFL talk with Kyle. Not a good Sunday performance by his Giants, but we're not going to talk about that too much. Probably not at all. Just to give him a little break from the misery, and none of us like talking good things about the Cowboys, so we feel like we can skip over that. Other than that, it's hard to detract that, but how are you doing, Kyle?
I think that's becoming a trend. Just misery by my Giants. But other than that, not doing too bad. How about you, man?
Pretty good. You can't lose when the Eagles have a bye week. Not that I think they would have. They probably would have won and did the tush push about 3 or 4 times. So I feel pretty good. Gotta shout out my new Jalen Hurts artwork here. Haven't got a chance to set that up yet, but yeah. Best $20 I ever spent at TJ Maxx, probably because I've never spent a lot of money there before. But yeah, good purchase, I'd say. But we do want to talk about the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, Mac Jones, all of it over there. They lose to the Colts in Germany. The Texans, surprising little run here, continuing. C.J. Stroud, I'm not going to say carrying the team, but he's a giant part of it, that's for sure. The Vikings, amazing story with Josh Dobbs. We talked about that last week, but still, the Vikings are surprisingly good this year. Like, you're missing Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, and you've been doing good in that stretch. So surprising there. And we'll see how long that talk goes. Maybe we'll talk a little 49ers because they dominated the Jaguars. But back to the top. Disappointing morning game. I mean, when you hear football starts at 9:30 on the East Coast, generally that's something that excites me. You get a chance to watch it a little bit before you go to church or before, you get up and get your morning going, whatever everybody's routine looks like on a Sunday. You didn't miss much if you didn't watch this game. I saw somebody bet like $500,000 on the under for this game. I mean, and that was a lock. The under was like 43 or something, and obviously total being only 16 points was a lock. But Patriots, very disappointing. Mac Jones gets benched in the game for Bailey Zappi, and they run some sort of... Did you see the fake spike that resulted in the interception?
Yeah.
That's embarrassing. I mean... I know Bill Belichick's not an offensive guy, but that's just embarrassing that your team puts that out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the amount of question marks that are surrounding this Patriots team is quite extraordinary to see where they were just, I don't know, even 2, 3 years ago. Even like right after Tom Brady left. I mean, obviously they weren't going to be the team that they were with Tom Brady, but I didn't expect them to be this bad. The fall from grace has been real, and it's tough to watch. I mean, any other fan base in football is actually enjoying it. You know, the Patriots are down at the bottom once again, and you know, this isn't something that we're used to in our lifetime. Um, but yeah, I mean, this was a game that really just wasn't interesting. And you can obviously tell that the NFL is pushing these more overseas games, which I'm all for. I think that's a really cool thing. It's growing the game. We talk about that in baseball all the time. You know, it's very important to grow the game, and I think that's exactly what they're doing with all these different games in Germany and London. And but yeah, I mean, it was just a very disappointing game. I'm curious to see your opinion on this. Bill Belichick's future in New England. Do you think it's up for determination?
I think the Patriots will be making a mistake if they bring Bill Belichick back next year. I think that his inability to adapt to the way the game's changed is just brutal to him. I mean, it's holding him so far back. Don't get me wrong; he's a great defensive mind, a great head coach, seems to be a pretty good motivator, and just a football genius for the most part. But we've seen in the past he doesn't do good at drafting. He doesn't do the offensive side of the football very well. And people were saying, is it 50-50 Tom Brady, Bill Belichick? It might have been more like 60-40, 70-30, and even more than that. Who knows? 75-25. Not to take anything away, because those Belichick defenses were stifling back in the day. I mean, you got the McCourty twins, Dante Hightower, all those guys. Big Vince Wilfork up front. So there was lots of studs on that team. But it's starting to look a lot more like Brady was really the main catalyst there in New England, and I think Robert Kraft has a real decision on his hands, seeing as he's basically the only guy who's above Bill Belichick in that organization, which is crazy because he's basically their GM. He does like all the drafting, which is wild. I think the coach should have some hand in the drafting, but the fact that you don't have a GM is kind of wild, or at least a GM who does anything, it seems like. Because they've had guys in and out a little bit, I believe. But yeah, I think they're making a mistake if they bring him back. Not to say he doesn't have a spot in the league, but either reduce his role or tell him, hey, you can't be involved so much on. I don't know how much he is involved on offense because he brings in his guys like Billy O, Bill O'Brien, but drafting, you got to cut that out, and you got to bring an offensive mind in there too, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was curious to see where you stood on that. If he does leave New England, I'm without a shadow of a doubt he will be hitched on elsewhere, or that's even if he wants to. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he's been in this league for a very long time. I think the respect, like no matter what happens in New England for the rest of his tenure, or even for the rest of his NFL career, whatever it is, the respect that he has gained and the rightful respect. I mean, he's one of the greatest coaches of all time. Um, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very interesting offseason for this New England team. And kind of piggybacking off of that, I think the Mac Jones era in New England is coming to an end. I think it has to. Even if they don't feel comfortable moving on from him yet, not really sure why they wouldn't, but I think it has to. I mean, it's bad, man. I mean, it's really bad.
It's one thing to have one of these two things, bad or mediocre play at the quarterback position, but then to have a terrible attitude about it and be just a total baby on the sideline and in press conferences. I mean, I don't like judging players, who they are as people, because we don't get to know them really at all. But like, he's one of the guys that you feel like just not a great guy necessarily. Not in a criminal type of way or anything, of course, but like, it kind of seems like a scumbag almost. I mean, there's video evidence of him taking cheap shots on players on the field. He's always whining and complaining in the media, and just it feels like he was a quarterback who was hyped up by the Alabama Crimson Tide, having my guy Devontae Smith there at receiver and having all these talented guys there that it's like, oh, this guy, oh, he was Alabama's quarterback and they won the national championship or they were in the national championship. He should be a top quarterback. Well, that's not always how that works. And I feel like he was hyped up a lot and he should have been fringe first round quarterback anyway, and they took him so high, like 15th or whatever. So I think they got to move on now. The question is, do you really want to bring in another rookie quarterback to start with Bill Belichick, or do you want to just start totally fresh as an organization and bring a new head coach, new quarterback, new coordinators, new everything, and start the whole thing over? Because, as we know, great quarterback draft coming up.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I think New England needs it, man. I mean, I think they've been at the top for so long, and I think they just need to fully commit to the rebuild, and just, you know, it's their time. They've been on top of this league for way too long. It is time for you guys to go through the pain that every other fan base has to go through. It doesn't last forever. We know that. I sure as hell know that. um, yeah, so, I mean, yeah, you had the glory years. I think it's just time to start new. That's what you got to do in New England, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on in the AFC, the Texans. What a great story. What a great turnaround for them. We were expecting them to be like a 1 or 2, 3 win team this season. Supposed to be, well, they didn't have their number 1 draft pick because they traded it with the Cardinals, they traded, I think it was with the Cardinals to get the. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because they got Bryce Young, or not Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and they got Will Anderson. So yeah, they traded their first round pick this year for last year. So we were expecting them to be high in the drafting order. Not that they had their pick anyway. It was the Cardinals. They gave it to the Cardinals. We were expecting that, and that's not been the case. C.J. Stroud has been, like we said last week, best rookie quarterback this season. And honestly, the Texans are a little bit underrated. I'm not going to say they were like a great team because they're building, okay? They've got the room to improve for sure. But you got to love what you see from C.J. Stroud, from Nico Collins, from all these guys. Noah Brown had a huge breakout game yesterday. So I think there's a lot to be excited about in Houston there.
100%. And I would not go as, I mean, I'd go as far and say that I think Stroud might be getting some MVP votes. I mean, the amount of breakout that this kid has done in the last season, and working with, and I really don't want to say nothing because there is some nice playmakers and some nice building tools that this team has. But if it wasn't for CJ Stroud, this team would be nowhere close to where they are. I think this kid is the absolute future for the Texans, and I mean, I'm just going to piggyback off what I said last week. This kid is the real deal, and I think this Texans team has a lot to be excited about. I really do. And even though they don't have a first-round pick this year, I think they made out pretty damn good for what they're doing this season. I think just a couple pieces away. I really think it's just bringing the right guys in. It's almost hard to screw this up if you're the Texans. I would think. I think, like I said, I think they just need to bring a few more guys in to build around Shroud, beef up the defense a little bit. But no, I think they have the foundation in Houston, and they just need to keep going. I I'm not saying that they're going to be winning playoff games here this year, maybe even next year. But I think they just need to keep doing what they're doing, and I think they have a damn good future down there in Houston.
Yeah, there's a chance. I mean, they're sitting at 5-4 in their division, which is good enough for second in their division, behind the Jaguars. And the Jaguars have shown flashes of being good, but then, like I said in the preamble, flashes of not so great when they get their butts kicked by the 49ers. So there's a chance. There is a good chance that the Texans could win this division. I don't feel bad saying that, but definitely bright future ahead of them, no doubt about it. Of course, didn't even say, but they walked off the Bengals on yesterday with the field goal to win the game. So love that. Love all the walk-off field goals yesterday. That was interesting. I did in my little NFL recap from yesterday, but 5 walk-off field goals yesterday.
It's crazy.
That is crazy. Any given Sunday, I guess, really. As much as I hate saying cliche things like that. But moving on to the Vikings. We mentioned Josh Dobbs. Fantastic story last week. But the Vikings team as a whole, what they're doing compared to what they were supposed to be doing, kind of remarkable. I mean, they weren't supposed to be very good coming into this season, not supposed to be competing for the division probably. Their defense is pretty bad. Would you trade Kirk Cousins at the trade deadline with his contract expiring here soon? And then Justin Jefferson gets injured, and it's like, oh, well, you really might trade Kirk Cousins now. They don't. He gets injured, and it's like, well, this is not good. You bring in Josh Dobbs, and they've been rolling. I mean, sitting 6-4 right now, and second in their division, which I don't see them catching the Lions personally. I think the Lions are a really good team, especially in the NFC. Definitely top 3, about top 4, somewhere in there. But just making a lot, not with nothing, but like with what they have is quite impressive at this point, and I think there's a good chance they're a playoff team this year.
Oh yeah, for sure. Jordan Addison is an absolute beast. I love watching him, and my cousin, he's a Vikings fan, and on draft night, I texted him and I said to him, I swear to God, if the Vikings take Jordan Addison here right before my Giants have a pick, I'm gonna be pissed. And I've been scouting this guy since college. I absolutely love his game. I thought that he was going to be a playmaker no matter where he went. I was really hoping it'd be my Giants, but of course, no. The Vikings took him, and he's proving why he got all the comps that he did and got. I mean, he's been that guy ever since Justin Jefferson got out. The thing is, if I'm not mistaken, the Vikings won their last 4 games.
5.
And okay, last 5 games. So you bring in Josh Dobbs, right? Thinking, maybe he'll just hold us over until Kirk comes back and until Jefferson comes back. Well, guess what? He did a little bit more than hold them over. Now he's got them in the driver's seat, and they're finally getting back Jefferson. I believe might be next week. If not,
Yeah.
so you're getting Jefferson back. Josh Dobbs is turning into Tom Brady. I mean, this is everything's going right in Minnesota. I mean, this team's defense, like you said, I mean, listen, if you're going to get beat by a Giants team in the playoffs, your defense is bad, especially with the offense we're carrying out there every single day. So yeah, I mean, I like this Vikings team, man, and I think they have a lot to be excited about. Let's just hope that they can keep it up, because if history repeats itself, it's not going to look good for the Vikings.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's a very exciting thing. I'm so happy for Josh Dobbs, dude. I think that is such a cool story. Yeah, just keep rolling, and guess what? You're getting Jefferson back. That's exactly what you need. So
Exactly.
it's very exciting times in Minnesota.
Yeah, and their upcoming schedule pretty favorable to them in the next 3 games. Broncos next week, and then the Bears, the Raiders. Yeah, it gets a little harder from there. The last 4 consist of Bengals, Lions, Packers, Lions. So, bit of a tough divisional stretch there, but these next 3, you should win at least 2 of them. I mean, there's a good chance you win all 3 of them, and you're on an 8-game heater. And people are talking about Vikings in the playoffs for sure. Vikings could win this division, depending how the Lions play in that 3-week stretch there. But I think you got to feel great if you're a Vikings fan right now. And this sort of all started started snowballing with that win over the. Well, I mean, you beat the Bears to start this stretch. Okay, great. Anybody can do that. But that win over the 49ers is what I was getting to. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody was counting you out on that Monday night game. The 49ers favored by at least a touchdown, I believe, and Kirk Cousins in prime time, all this. And, I mean, Cousins at the time was able to make the plays, and he was able to lead the team to that victory and really started snowballing there. And the fact that Dobbs was able to pick up where Kirk Cousins left off is really, really incredible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, okay, let's just. I want to put a hypothetical out there for you. So, Cousins comes back, but Dobbs is absolutely. I mean, he just keeps rolling. Do you think they stick with Dobbs, or do you think they go back to Cousins?
Well, as you preface that hypothetical, totally hypothetical, because Kirk
Yeah.
Cousins is a torn Achilles, not coming back this
I,
year.
I'm curious to see because if Dobbs is playing like this, and I mean he was playing like this in Arizona too, with almost, I mean, what did he really have?
That's a
So
good question.
I'm
Dobbs
curious. I just wanted to see if what you think.
Dobbs brings a different style in that he can switch it up with the run game occasionally, which is huge. Um,
Hmm.
but I feel like when you have a guy like Kirk Cousins there, your franchise guy, kind of, you sort of got to bring him back. Like we said, totally hypothetical. But
Hmm.
if it would be the case, I think you got to bring Kirk back. But
Okay.
my
All right.
opinion. So,
I just wanted
um,
to know. Just
yeah,
curious.
yeah. So that was really the three teams we wanted to cover here, trying to keep it around the 20-minute mark here for you for the NFL half. So props to the 49ers. They took care of business against the Jaguars. Lions were one of the five teams who walked it off. Ravens, you lost to the Browns, is a bump in the road. That's how I look at it. I mean, divisional games, anything can happen in those. So I don't feel bad about where the Ravens are at
Mm-mm.
all. Still, this game didn't change anything to me. Um,
No.
yeah, I think that's going to do it. Unless you got anything else you want to add on here.
I don't think so. I'm putting my full faith into Tommy DeVito. Hopefully his hopefully
No,
his
you're
living
tanking. You're
home.
tanking for Caleb Williams at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of hoping that uh, I mean, next week is a huge pivotal moment in the Giants draft. I mean, we're playing Washington. I hope we lose. Um,
That's great.
listen, as a Giants fan, I'm really I needing something. So I'm all eyes for that second pick. Um, yeah, so yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Knowing the Giants past, though, it'll work out. They draft Michael Penix like number 2 overall, and then his injuries history comes up again, and you're stuck with Tommy DeVito again. Daniel Jones
Or
is your 40 million backup.
that's what I was gonna say. Well, we still have the 40 million backup, so we'll be all right.
That's right. Yeah. um, yeah, that's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in, watching, listening, all that stuff. Appreciate it, and yeah, we'll see you again next week. Later.
Later.